Hello everyone. I'm Miguel Beltran. I'm a freelance mobile developer based here in Berlin. And I've been learning about this lifestyle called minimalism for the last years. And I always thought it would be interesting to see how minimalism can be applied to software development. And I like to call this minimalism-driven development. Not working, okay. So minimalism is gaining popularity in general media. You probably have heard about tidying up on Netflix, documentaries, podcasts, YouTube channels, blogs, and books. And all of them have one thing in common, is to teach us to live a more meaningful life with less. But also when we think about minimalism, we think about an empty room with just one chair, someone there sitting, eating plain rice every single day. Maybe we think about someone whose all possessions fit in one single bag. Those are extremes, and you should not take them as examples of what minimalism is. Minimalists seek to live a happier life with less, not necessarily to get rid of things, although that helps. And today I want to show you this idea, how minimalism can be applied in code, how you can be a happier developer and develop better products with less clutter. My talk is split in 3 parts. I'll be talking about code, I'll be talking about design, and I'll be talking also about personal time management. The idea of minimalism in software development is not new. Back in the 70s and in the 80s, resources of machines were very limited and expensive. 8 to 16 kilobytes of RAM was common, and 64 kilobytes was considered a vast amount for the entire address space. Another example of this is the Unix command line tools. These are single-purpose applications like list, copy, move, change directory, and all of them are independent programs. They follow the Unix philosophy of do one thing and do it well. Learning about the Unix philosophy made me realize how in common they have also with minimalism approaches. For example, from Eric Raymond's 17 Unix rules, he includes the following: build modular software, use composition, write readable programs, write small programs, and avoid unnecessary output. Over time, personal computer memory and CPU expanded in orders of magnitude, and mainstream programmers took the advantage of this added performance to increase their software capabilities and to make development easier by using higher-level languages. Not only hardware expanded, but also the way we build software. We went from these single-purpose command line tools to complex, feature-rich software, which sometimes is even too bloated. We focused on the speed of development and not on the usage of resources. We all know Slack. We all know how it uses a big chunk of our computer resources when it runs. If you are not aware, Slack runs on what is called Electron, which is a framework for creating desktop applications using JavaScript. Electron is basically a Chrome browser, so every Electron app is in fact an instance of Chrome also running. Can you recognize this device here? This is an Xbox 360 gamepad. Chrome, and by extension Electron, contain a userland USB driver for Xbox 360 controllers. And not many people know that. And in fact, I know that because it was the author of the driver who wrote that in a blog post. So just imagine what is there. I don't want to criticize products that use Electron. It can be the right tool for the job, given a situation. But I want you to be aware about all the things that we don't see and that we should be aware of in our projects. Think of it like having a really, really nice house that then you have a basement full of junk. Anyways, I will not be talking about desktop or web. We build mobile apps, and that's my focus today. Mobile development brought back the idea of minimalism in software development. Originally, 10 years ago, our smartphones were very limited in terms of processing and battery. And as technology progressed, we also put priority on these fast-to-build and feature-rich solutions. But I want you to keep in mind that while we do enjoy those awesome machines in our pockets and all that 4G internet or 5G soon, the next billion users lives a different reality. There are many countries that mobile data is very expensive, compared to the local salaries especially. In Greece, so here in Europe, the price of 1 gigabyte of data is in average $32 a month. And even in some places in Africa, this average price can go up to $75. This graph here is showing you all the countries where 1 gigabyte of data is more than $10 on average. So think about the amount of work a minimum wage worker in one of these countries need to do to download your app. Of course, we are not the only ones responsible of this. We don't decide which features are going to be in our apps. It's our managers who do that, the stakeholders. But we can decide which frameworks and libraries we want to use, how to optimize resources and shrink code. We can compress JSON data, and we can make features also available offline. Thinking about Android, the size of our apps has always been a topic of discussion. Thankfully, the Android team is giving us a set of recommendations that we can follow to reduce the app size. Those include shrink resource, to remove unused resource from our project. This option will not work if it's not also using Minify-enabled option. And in this case, what we are doing is we're asking Progward to declutter our APK. But minimalists are not only interested in getting rid of things. We also want to avoid bringing them in before. That's why we like to keep in mind the libraries we use. If there's a solution out there that works well and has a small impact in our code base, we prefer it. For example, we are not going to use RxJava to do async work because we have coroutines. Sometimes it's even worth checking what do we need a library for and see if we can come with a solution by ourselves. Or, for example, use one of the things that are built in our frameworks or in the language. For example, instead of using a library that wraps a recycler view, well, you can actually do it yourself. But there's the other extreme, which is called not invented here. And that's essentially when a team decides that instead of using a well-known solution, they go ahead and they implement one by themselves. We know lots of examples of this, right? How many architecture libraries are out there? Or anyone remembers this reactive programming library from Google, which was kind of replacing RxJava. Minimalists look to reduce as well the amount of headaches and the time we spend doing things. So we need to keep a balance here between adding unnecessary clutter and doing everything from scratch. A minimalist looks for the best option and tries to stick to it. Another example of this problem is deciding what to use for continuous integration. You can subscribe to an online solution, or you can build it by yourself. And when you pick an online solution, you also have services that pretty much do everything for you, and other ones that you have to write from scratch. As a minimalist, I am more inclined by the turnkey solutions. Of course, you cannot customize them as much as you want. Maybe they are a bit more expensive. But also, they give you less headache and less problems that you need to own. And as we see during this talk, avoiding extra stress on top of our professional lives is one of the main goals of thinking like a minimalist. We talk about libraries and also Progward, but we didn't talk about going through the code and doing a manual cleanup. Keeping the resource folder at minimum, it's essential. We need to get rid of those layouts, drawables, XMLs that are no longer used. And my recommendation for you is to have a link check that will break the build if you left any unused resources on your project. Finally, app bundles. And I have to say that they do a great work at reducing the size of our apps. But on the other hand, the managed APK signing is something that not everyone likes. In my opinion, if it helps reducing the size of the apps, it is welcome. I'm going to share a story from a friend. She told me that she used the famous KonMari decluttering method to go through a code base. And the KonMari method can be summarized in these 4 steps. You pick a category of something, of household thing, for example, books. You go through the objects of your home for that category, not only your bedroom or not only your living room, but you go through the whole house, and you put them together in one place. Then you go one object by object, and you decide if you want to keep this object or not. So she did the same thing with the code base. She picked a category in the code base, and, for example, everything related to payments. And then she went through the code base and realized that there were many use cases that repeated kind of like the same code and the same logic inside. So she discarded and consolidated those parts. And then she moved into the next category until the whole code base was cleaned up. Decluttering code is a good start, but the better start is to make the things as simple as possible from the very beginning. And I want you to ask this question and think about it. Imagine that you are in a project that uses MVVM, and you need to create a new screen, which is very simple, and in fact, it has no logic, this screen. It's just displaying some layout and some text. Do you still create a view model for that? There's people who do that. They say they do this for the sake of consistency. But personally, I'm against that, because you don't need this view model. I think that saying, we're going to use view model for every single screen, is the wrong approach. You should say, if we need to add logic to this screen, we are going to go with MVVM. This way of thinking is called, you ain't going to need it. By keeping that in mind, we avoid the early optimization of our code. We should try to stop ourselves deciding the architecture templates that we are going to use before understanding the problem that we have in hand. That includes making decisions about dependency injection, architecture libraries, and so on. Another example of this is databases. I love Room, and I want to use it on every single project. But sometimes you just don't need a database for your problem. Keep the architecture simple. Some say that the database is an implementation detail. And sometimes storing a response that you get from the backend locally is valid depending on the use case. You don't have to build a database for that. Always, whatever you decide, keep an abstraction, separating your implementation to the rest of the code. So the day that this local file solution doesn't work anymore and you want to replace it with a database, it's going to be easy to swap. All these principles define what I call focusing on a minimalist code. Mind the app size. Avoid unused resources. Consider simple self-made solutions. Or avoid headaches by using industry standard solutions. Do not early optimize. Pick the right tool for the job and declutter periodically. Thank you. I have talked extensively about minimalism in code. But where minimalism shines is in design. Minimalism can be applied successfully to user interfaces. The Apple products are a great example of this. And the same thing with material design from Google. By keeping a simple user experience, we help the user by not making them think. You can reach a greater audience by using clean, high contrast, and easy to use user interfaces. In the book, The More or Less, the author said, you don't need more space, you need less stuff. When your designs don't fit the screen, the solution is not to put a scrollable wrapping everything. But instead, try to create a responsive design that can be followed by the user. And we will see some tools to do that. Flat design is currently used in many modern applications, and both material design and the human interface guidelines from Apple kind of follow these principles. It uses flat components with little to no elements or curves, and it avoids excessive highlights, shadows, gradients, and textures. This helps creating content which will look good on many resolutions and many sizes. But most importantly, flat design improves contrast and reduces noise, which makes your products more accessible. Typography is an important element of minimalism in design. Readable but beautiful captions belong both to your content and to your design. One has to always keep in mind internationalization when using text in design, and this becomes more important when the text is also part of your content. Avoid embedding text in images, and be sure that it can always be accessed using screen readers. One major problem that many products face is called analysis paralysis, and this is also known as the paradox of choice. Users get overwhelmed by the amount of options offered, and so they leave your app because they are afraid of choosing the wrong option. An example of this is having too many multiple subscription options with different pricing, different features. Users at the end get confused, and ultimately they leave your app without subscribing. A similar problem happens with all non-functional decorative elements that you can have on your screen. You can have images that act like buttons and things that look like buttons but in reality are images. Text that is clickable and text that is not clickable. The design guidelines of each platform can help you choose the right UI widget for your users so they will have it easier to interact with your product. Having high contrast is a good side effect of deciding for a minimalist design. It is a tool that designers can use to give more importance to content and create visual hierarchies. The empty space is another important tool for designers, with minimalist in mind. It is the most risky one, to be honest, because we have very limited real estate. But it can help users find what's exactly important for them while keeping all the designs beautiful. And in doubt, always remove decorative elements and embrace the empty space. Finally, navigation. Since we have less elements in the screen and we want to guide users to the right content with them, having well-defined navigation hierarchy is important. It is also important to understand the main navigation patterns of Android and iOS and what are the differences between them. The bottom navigation, the screen stack, having view pagers, use the right one for the platform. Minimalism and mobile design go hand by hand. Aim for less things on the screen. Use a flat design. Use typographies for your own benefit. Simplify your product offerings. Clearly define functional elements. Use high contrast designs. Experiment with the empty space and use navigation correctly. We have learned different techniques on how we can build and design software, thinking like minimalists. But now we need to sit and do the actual work. The challenge is not over. Our modern workspace is in fact very cluttered. Let's see how we can improve that. Focusing at work is one of the major problems we face. It is not legacy code or the lack of tests or the build times. It is the noise, it is the interruptions, and it's the lack of focus. I am a big advocate of working from home or having a private office, but I understand that not everyone has this privilege. So I will offer you some tips you can apply no matter which is your workplace. When someone starts a more minimalist life, what they usually do is they go through decluttering of their homes. Decluttering is the first step, and minimalism is the experience when you are on the other side. A messy desk at work is not good for your productivity. It is distracting, it affects your reputation with your colleagues, and even it can reduce your self-confidence. So start by cleaning your desk, make it a habit. Every morning, pick papers, dirty Macs, and improve your cable management. Remove any hardware that you are not currently using. Declutter can also be useful for your computer desktop. How many of you have a full desktop full of screenshots? So do yourself a favor and delete all of them. You don't need to keep them for anything. But what about email or Slack? Is it cluttered also? Do you have 10,000 emails in your inbox? Or you follow more than 10 Slack teams? How many channels have you joined in your company Slack? And do you need really to be there with all of that? Before Slack, our resource of distractions at work was email. I work in teams where we were receiving emails 24/7 because we had clients and team members in many different time zones. I quickly learned that I should not have my work email on my personal phone, and I recommend you to do the same. Now what happens with all those Jira notifications, the GitHub emails, and also the Android Weekly and the Kotlin Weekly, all these emails that we accumulate in our inboxes? Because we lost Inbox by Gmail, right? That was taking care of that for us. And our email is full of those. I practice what is called Inbox Zero. Inbox Zero means that I keep 0 emails on my email inbox. And to do so, I archive them or I snooze them as soon as I get them. And I try to keep no email in my inbox. That also helped me is to unsubscribe from pretty much all notifications that I receive, and also from all newsletters. Find what is actually useful for you and keep it, and unsubscribe from the rest. For example, I follow Twitter accounts of my favorite local meetups, so I don't really need to receive the emails from Meetup every time there is a new event. With email communication, less is more. There is this useful website called 5 Sentences. They advocate to treat email like SMS, being brief and to the point. And to practice that, you limit yourself to 5 sentences. You can apply this principle also when communicating over Slack, like try to explain what you want to say with just 5 sentences instead of like a huge conversation. Back when I started working in tech, I worked for a company where we had phones in our tables, like landline phones. So you could call other coworkers, picking some numbers on the table. And when we moved to instant messaging, for me it was a revolution, because each time a coworker needed something and called you, it was an immediate interruption, like you cannot delay that, you need to pick it up. Instant messaging allowed us to keep focused and get back to our coworker when we need that. Perhaps when you're compiling or when you finish a task. So when we got Slack, I love it instantly, and I still do. But I think we need to learn how to use Slack correctly. We usually join too many channels because we fear of missing out. We join the general, the random, announcements, but then we have an Android channel, we have a second Android channel where managers cannot go in, and then there is like beer channel and lunch train channel and so. The problem is that all of that is distracting us from our work. And when a coworker uses @here or @channel to say something, we all get a notification. That makes us lose the focus. Some of us even have notifications for every single message, so not just for channels. A thing that you can do is to mute channels. I used to do that. So I join a channel when I need something, and then I mute it shortly. And pretty much all the channels that are on my Slack are muted. Muting is a less aggressive way of leaving channels, because unfortunately, there's too much pressure to be reachable, to be on the channel, and to listen on every single conversation. And I think we should try to push that back. One thing that your company can do is to remove the little messages that appear when someone joins or leaves a channel. You can do that in the Slack settings when you are the administrator. So leaving a channel you are not interested on is not going to punish you in any way. It's not going to be seen as an attack to the person who is speaking. You just simply, okay, this is not for me now. You leave the channel, no one notices. As well, I recommend you to keep open communication. No private conversations, no water cooler conversations offline. Document everything in public channels. Create single-purpose Slack channels when you need a specific discussion, and maybe archive them where you're done. And please, pay for your tools. Like, if your company is not paying for Slack, don't use Slack, because it doesn't work without the search and everything. Our IDE can also be a source of distractions, and I like to keep it as simple as possible. And one of the things that I have done is to disable tabs. And then I switch files quickly using the recent files and recent edited files. In Mac, it is Command-E and Command-Shift-E. And when I need to have two files open at the same time, I use the action to split vertically, so I can have one file next to the other. I have also removed the toolbar, the tool buttons, the status bar, and the navigation bar. Okay, I'm not telling you to do this, but maybe you can get ideas. You can always reach what you need using the action search with Shift-Command-A. So with Command-Shift-A, you type anything, and then you will find it there, so if you don't have the buttons. Also, I have uninstalled many of the plugins that come by default in Android Studio, including the Git plugin, because I was using another Git client, and I didn't like to have these messages all the time asking me, do you want to add this file to Git? Yes, but I will do that later on my own Git client. I don't need to do that now. So these little interruptions are really bad. So having a minimal IDE helps me to keep focused on my work. Let's talk about our work schedule. Do you ever feel that you have too many meetings? For the last 6 months, I worked on a project where I did not have daily stand-ups, no retros, no all hands. I was just having meetings when I needed to talk with my colleagues. So if your schedule looks like this, you should start taking care of it. My recommendation is to find places in your calendar and block them, like empty spaces, and block them. You can create an event and call it focus or development, something like this. For example, you can block a full day a week, if you can, or Fridays, or block a range between 2 days. And of course, let your colleagues know that you are not available for the meeting. Deep work means you take one task at a time and you close the rest of distractions. At any moment of the day, you can only do one thing at a time. And the more intentional you are about it, the more present you will be. Less is more sometimes can also be applied to wealth. And this is a controversial one. We receive new opportunities every single day. A recruiter email on LinkedIn, maybe your boss is asking you if we want to take on a new project, or there's a call for volunteers for help. Someone is asking you if you want to speak in a conference or in a meetup. That doesn't mean that you need to say yes to everything. Sometimes switching to a better paid position is not necessarily it's going to make us happier. And this is why many minimalists that have applied all these lifestyle changes, they have moved into more simple, relaxed work jobs and roles. The same can be applied to the roles we take. We shouldn't force ourselves to go into management or leadership positions if that is not going to make us happy, even if the salary is slightly better. You don't need to become a manager to be successful. Learning to say no, even to good opportunities, is hard. This year, I had to say no to 2 conferences that accepted a talk of mine because I could not simply commit to it. I had new personal responsibilities, and adding 2 conferences on a very short period of time was going to be a huge commitment. We can say no to many things: new responsibilities, social events, even the conference party. Maybe we prefer to go to the hotel and rest, and that's perfectly fine. Minimalists value resources a lot, and that includes also our time and energy. Saying no to things is a way to have time for the things that really matter to us. And a simple rule that you can follow is to ask yourself, is this going to improve my life in any way? When we say no to things, we learn to value the things that we are saying yes, and we enjoy those decisions more. My last message today is about how we spend our time and energy at conferences. Conferences are a huge emotional investment because they are not only very expensive to our pockets, our budget, but also to our body and to our mind. As minimalists, it's important that we focus on the things that are bringing us joy. And I'm not going to tell you who you have to hang out with, but I can tell you that you should be mindful about how and with whom you are going to spend your time in the conference. You don't have to spend the whole conference with your coworkers, for example, or go to the same talks that your friends are going. Be mindful about the time and energy that you have for the 2 or 3 days that a conference is running. And the speakers are always thrilled to speak with attendees. In my experience, the less known a speaker is, the more likely they will chat with you. So don't be afraid of approaching them. That's a good opportunity. Minimalists try to obtain the best results by focusing on what really matters. To do so, we try to keep clear workspaces, free of distractions, reducing the amount of interruptions we attain by minimizing the amount of notifications and emails that we receive. Being direct and to the point can be seen as rude, but it's a key for effective communication. Our IDE can also be a source of distractions, and we can improve that by keeping only the actual features of it that we need. Meetings are important, but so is the time to focus. So don't forget to keep and block the time on your schedule. Say yes to the things that actually matter to you, and don't be afraid to say no to the rest. I hope that my talk helped you learn a new way of thinking how we can build software together. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm happy to chat with you.